So good evening everybody, welcome to tonight's guest top talk session. Hi Dave, I know you're in the wings, I can hear you.
Hi, that's correct, yes.
Excellent.
Waiting here, thank you, good evening.
Thank you, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, and thank you for joining us tonight. So I've had a bit of a sneaky peek and a chat in advance with you, but got lots to cover this evening. But Dave, just before we do sort of get into any detail about obviously the drone photography and everything, just tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of your history with photography, and then how it sort of has developed now into the drone business.
Okay, thanks very much, Jay, and good evening everybody. Thanks for listening in. Yeah, my photography, I've actually done photography on and off for 30 years. Previously, I'm actually from a nuclear design and build background, nuclear submarines. So really, going back 20 or 30 years ago, we were in the very early stages of CAD drawings and what have you. So I was very fortunate where I was actually able to undertake photographic assignments during the design phase. Therefore, I sort of almost fell into photography and come from a techie family as well, so photography to me was very interesting. And then particularly when we then started to move into the digital era, then again that was another great opportunity for myself. And I think I'd also, like a lot of photographers, I kind of dropped into the, oh, can you do the friend's wedding routine? And I'm sure there's a number of people online will, affiliate and understand this, that of course you take that on board and then suddenly as the day gets closer you realise you've got a bit of responsibility, hence you start buying backup kit. So really from there it blossomed into a part-time, and then about 15 years ago I left the nuclear industry and sat down and thought, right, what am I going to do now for the rest of our lives? And I need a change. I was doing a lot of travelling away with the family, so I suddenly thought, right, I've always done photography on and off, quite like chatting with people, meeting people, so we decided 15 years ago to set up a photography business, and actually we're still doing that now today full-time.
Absolutely brilliant, and obviously that's developed now into sort of, not only, I know you have a successful photography business, but obviously you've developed now and brought the drone photography and filming into your business as well, Dave.
Yeah, what we've realised, and again a number of people that are listening in, if they're looking at photography and let's say the wedding market, we know that it's an incredibly competitive market. Therefore we're looking at ways of, one, diversifying, and also because of the technology now, you've got convergence happening with cameras now having a filming video mode as well as stills mode. So it seemed almost logical to us that if we could incorporate that into the business, then it's a win-win, because we can control, let's say, the wedding, golf event, commercial shoot, and we can offer our clients the film and the stills. Then of course with the advent of drone technology, we looked at that other gap in the market and got in quite early on that curve to think that we can also offer that to our clients. And indeed by doing so, what we've noticed is you're almost, which I'll cover a little bit during the presentation, you're almost now the go-to person and the one-stop shop, and it just makes it easier to book all the services under one umbrella.
Brilliant, Dave, brilliant. Well, I know we've got loads to cover, so we won't waste any time, so I'm going to give you the screen, bud, and I'll let you know when we can see it's coming over to you now. There we go. I can see it. We're in full screen mode. I can hear you nice and clear, Dave, and we can see everything. Just to remind everybody, any questions you have for Dave, please pop those to the question panel. I'll pass them through where appropriate. And of course, we've got plenty of time at the end. Dave, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Jay. So thanks very much again, everybody, for logging in. What I propose to do this evening is, as we mentioned, take you through an overview of our business, and moving on predominantly this evening to talk about aerial drone photography. So a little bit of a company overview. We've already touched on it, but a little wedding analogy here for the wedding photographers out there. We've put a little twist on. You'll see a few words coming in with for richer, for poorer, in sickness, in health, for better, for worse, and until death us do part. So we've put a little bit of a wedding slant on this evening's presentation as well. So what I propose to do, we'll give you an idea of some financials, Then a couple of little reminders for people out there, almost as an aside from the drone presentation, just a little bit of opportunity for people to sharpen the pencils and make a couple of notes on the game changer. A topic we'll be looking at obviously is technology, kit, air safety, and whether that's for better or for worse we'll look at. And as we've already touched on with Jay, we've got the opportunity now to diversify or die. And of course we'll be droning on and on, so away we go. So company overview. So as we mentioned, we've been established now 15 years, and originally we started off doing wedding photography, predominantly stills. But now, as we mentioned earlier, we've now moved into film production, training, aerial photography and films. So as I mentioned, with the convergence with the technology, then you've now got an opportunity to offer yourself and be seen as the one-stop shop. So we've managed to, over the years, pick up a number of clients that we do varying amounts of work for. And I think as everybody understands now, it's a difficult marketplace to find and retain clients. So we're very keen on trying to make sure we get repeat business and work from all of our clients, but it is difficult, and we appreciate it's a never-ending toil to do that. Hence why the drone actually gives us, at the moment, a potential USP. I mean, there's a number of really good qualified drone pilots out there, and we'll come to that as the presentation unfolds. But what we've also noticed is that it's given us a gap in the market, and we've been able to so far capitalise a little bit on that. But this little pie chart there just gives you now an overview of what we call our product mix. So again, it's fairly similar to a number of photographers out there. If you're fortunate enough to earn your living, let's say as a commercial photographer, excellent, or as a filmmaker, excellent. But I think what we've found in the industry is that most photographers will do one or two or maybe three of these disciplines. Just to clarify as well, we've actually got two photographers that work for us, and also a guy that does filming for us, and one person that helps with retouching. But it's the sole income for our family. So that tends to concentrate the mind, and therefore we obviously need a little bit more money coming in because we haven't got a backstop of other part-time or paid employment. So as you can see on the chart, we cover weddings, events. What do we mean by events? We do a lot of golf events, for instance, black tie functions, but the vast majority of our work is now prepaid. And in the commercial world, then we're doing photographing hotels, products, headshots for people. Then we've got a little section on portraits and training as well. And what we've noticed over the years is that this product mix obviously fluctuates with the market and or our business choices, and the drone certainly being one of them. So just to say at the outset here as well, if people are struggling with the northern accent, unfortunately we won't really be able to have Jay interjecting too much. So you just have to try your best to stick with the northern accent. So how has it evolved? As I've just mentioned, we keep looking at our product mix and the business turnover and profits so that we can then make the correct decision for our business. And similar with yourselves, you need to sit down and decide what's right for your business. This evening, I don't have all the answers. All I know is that this particular part, particularly the drone aspect, is now working well for our business. How long that cycle continues, we're unsure of, but for now, we're enjoying, and things are taking off, excuse the pun. So drones are definitely a USP, And it could be for you guys out there, anybody that wants to come on board and get flying. As long as you're legal and safe, then that will be great. And again, we'll cover that during the presentation. But photography is still our bread and butter. I don't foresee becoming full-time drone pilots at this moment in time. And for example, in the wedding photography world, then we just looked at it and thought, well, if we don't diversify, we may well die, because the market itself is quite saturated. We're very fortunate to work at some really jolly nice venues, but again, it's still a competitive market, as we all know. So just as I mentioned, just as an aside earlier on, that you might just want to sharpen your pencil. So irrespective of drone and droning on and on, for those people that are working from home, we're fortunate. We have a separate studio and we have 3 or 4 mechanisms of backing up images. But I'm just going to share with you a little letter that our wonderful bookkeeper wrote to the VAT department, and it's quite interesting having a look at it. It says, "I've not enclosed a VAT payment check as the owner of the company's house is burning down as I type. I posted the VAT letter return and left a note for the company to write the check ASAP. The owner works from a separate studio, so all records should be intact. However, as yet, I'm unable to confirm." So what I'm actually saying, just as a little bit of an aside, that you might want to consider backing up your imagery and your footage, because unfortunately this was our home. So just really, again folks, just think about backing up your footage, particularly commercial, weddings. They are one-off events. You're never going to be able to repeat them, so therefore please back up your imagery. Moving on. So diversify or die, and we've got for better for worse. Just a little bit here on the financials, looking at last year. So on the chart there, we've got a breakdown of just a portion of our business. This is the extra profit we brought in from the introduction of drones. And just to mention, while we're on this topic, then as you can see, reprints here, we're huge believers in the power of print and making sure that we still have printed media out there. And interestingly, we actually sell our images. We do not give images away to everybody all and a sundry, particularly when you're now starting to move into the drone world, because as you'll see later on, there's a lot that goes into it to actually get yourself on board and literally in the air. And the filming aspect as well has been quite profitable for us this year. So by adding on these extras into our product mix has meant a big difference to our business so far. So droning on and on. So here we go. Let's have a little look. So no doubt tonight there'll be a number of questions from people that talking about kit and uses of drone, entry-level drones, professional drones. What do we do? So it's interesting where if you're looking now, you've got a number of names, whether it's a UAV, an RPAS, an SUA. There's lots of names out there, but the one name that won't go away is drone. So being honest, I think the industry have now come to terms with the fact that we just call them drones. The drone really has the military connotation. However, this evening we're looking at non-military use. So you've got lots of things now that drones are being used for. Delivery, search and rescue, housing photography. So we've done some work, for example, with Hamptons, estate agents photographing their property. Because if you've got a nice piece of real estate with expanse of land, tennis courts, swimming pool, then you've got a unique dimension that the drone can bring to that. And even in healthcare, you've got now medicines, legal medicines, I'll actually say, being delivered in and out of disparate areas of the country. You've obviously got mapping that you can do, and crop management, aerial crop management. So even now, early on in the drone world, there's quite a lot of professionals out there now that are earning a living from providing specialist structural surveys, crop management filming. And of course, you've got the police now with law enforcement. And search and rescue is another growing market where you can actually put a drone out into, you know, the hills of Wales, and if you're lucky enough, you might find Jay, or maybe unlucky enough. So you can see already where the uses of drones are huge. And obviously, I think we've also seen it on the TV now with journalism, and that's why, as filmmakers and photographers, we've got the opportunity to jump onto the bandwagon. And there's a nice little figure to concentrate the mind. It's been calculated by Goldman Sachs that the drone market itself is going to be worth about 20 billion in the next 5 years. So that's a lot of drones being purchased, and a lot of people flying them, and a lot of requests for the use of drones. But as we know, that then brings us into the realms of the amateur drone flyer compared to a professional. And of course, if you're going to start earning money, you need to be qualified and licensed, and we'll cover that fairly soon. So there's a whole range now of suppliers out there, whether you want to do drone racing, or whether you want to just fly as an amateur and or in a professional market. But just up on the screen now, you can see where that DJI have been the market leaders now since 2013. And they're bringing out drones on a 3 to 4 monthly basis. So it's the classic in the camera world, I'm afraid, guys. It doesn't matter whether you're Fuji, you're Panasonic, you're Canon, you're Nikon, whatever. DJI are very, very similar. They're always bringing out wonderful upgrades. And for the gents out there, it's very hard for us to resist buying them. And interestingly, very little of it is interchangeable. So we'll maybe cover that a little further as we go on. So is anything cropped up so far, Jay, from any of our lovely listeners?
Most of the questions that I've had so far, Dave, are actually about what I think we're going to be talking about now. So it was about the kit, the costs, as we expected. The only other question at the moment, but I don't think we're going to touch on it, is that it's more about the service, because obviously you've talked about the fact that you've incorporated it into your business. The question specifically is about incorporating drone photography into your wedding business. Are you selling that as an addition to the wedding package, or are you just selling drone photography for the wedding day? Is that different for you? How do people do it?
Okay, interesting question. So I'll probably take that one. I'll take it straight away, because we might touch on things later, but I'll take it straight away. One, we don't fly for free. We don't, because as people see later on, there's a huge cost to entry to get into this market. So we currently now are offering it as an addition to our wedding photography and or film services. So what we're doing is offering a pick and mix for people. Now, for the wedding photographers out there, it's really quite difficult if you're doing a wedding open day or wedding fair, that if you've got a bride walking around and they want to come over and look at your wedding portfolios, and as great photographers, we're all stood there hoping they're going to look at the tremendous photographs we produce. Whereas sometimes the gents are there and they might sometimes prefer to be at home watching the rugby or the football. And we almost find now that if we have our drone on show at the wedding fair, it's almost like the Peter Kay moment where the eyes go wider and the head turns 90 degrees because they see a bit of tech in the room. And suddenly their Sunday is not so bad. So we've actually found it's been a great way of hooking bride and grooms into our services. So that's why we offer it as an addition. So I don't include it in any of our packages at the moment, because it's interesting where people want to talk about it, and it's a separate bolt-on that we do. So I hope that at the moment covers that question.
Yeah, brilliant, Bud. I'll leave you crack on.
Again, more than happy. Don't have all the answers. That's just the way it seems to be working for us at the moment. So as you can see on the screen now, you've got DJI that seem to be the market leaders with the Phantom 4 Professional, Mavic Pro, Inspire 1 Pro and Inspire 2. So a number of people will be asking questions about entry level, what do I use, what's the difference? So really, if we think about, let's say in the camera world, you've got the Canon 5D Mark III, a very good, almost prosumer, because compared to, let's say, the bulkier 1DX in the Canon world, you've got the Phantom 4 Professional is almost the prosumer market. Well, certainly the Phantom 3 and the Phantom 4 are the prosumer market. But the Phantom 4 they've just brought out now, Professional, does indeed just take it to that extra level, excuse the pun. But really I would see that the Phantom 3 and 4 are a really good entry level drone. Now the Mavic Pro, which is one of their newer and latest editions, that's really entering into the walking fraternity and ease of use, because it really is a small, compact, fold away drone that you put in your rucksack and off you go. So again, the Mavic Pro now, again, excuse the pun, is taking off. So quite a bit of this comes down to a little trade-off in quality, price, and actually what your deliverable is for your client and ease of access. The Phantoms fly pretty well indoors as well, and you can fly Inspires, which are a larger drone altogether. You can fly them indoors, but you just find that the smaller drone is a little easier to control indoors. However, the technology that's now coming on to, let's say, Inspire 2s makes them also an indoor of great indoor use. But it's reflected in the price because the Inspires are more pro market. They are aimed directly at the pro image maker and certainly the film maker. Because on the Inspire Pros, you've got interchangeable lenses. So you can put on Panasonic lenses, wider lenses. It gives you a little more control and feel and scope to be more creative. Whereas the Phantoms and the Mavic are fixed lenses. So the lens is integral to the whole of the drone. Yes, you get control of it. Yes, you can see, of course, what you're filming or photographing, but in essence, it's a fixed lens. Whereas the Inspires, you get more into the photography and filmmaking mode because you've got far more control of aperture settings and you've got far more expanse of ISO control as well, whereas it's limited in the smaller prosumer market. So that gives you a little feel and a little idea for where you are with Phantoms. And again, that's only my opinion. We've got all of these that are listed here, and we're still sort of interchanging use of them, really dependent on the client and what the client's requiring. You can buy them all in kits, as we can now see coming up on the screen. And the interesting thing is, you're talking about bottom right hand here, the Mavic, £1,100 in sort of English money, £1,100. But there's so many add-ons and bolt-ons that everybody's going to need, and that applies for all of the drones that you can now see here. So I'm showing them really more in kit form, because if you're going out flying a drone, you're not going to go out with one drone and one battery. So just as an example, top right of the screen is the Inspire Pro. That's our favoured drone at the moment, and we actually have 10 batteries, and they're about 250 to £300 each. The interesting thing is that the Inspires that you're looking at on the top row, they both have the choice and the option of 2 controllers, which we use. So you've got an option now where one obviously the qualified drone pilot flies the drone, and you have a creative person that actually controls the camera. So one distinct advantage at the higher level, and to produce higher level or higher quality for your client, is you've got the dual controls. The Phantom 4, however, is a very nice, slick, easily transportable, good quality, but a fixed focus lens. With the Inspires, you're looking at 20 meg of raw data. So they're all going to shoot raw, and then you can convert. And you're looking at 4K video. Indeed, the new Inspire 2 is 5.2K video. So you can see now, even just looking through these, you've got a lot of choice, and the trade-off comes from £1,000 versus £6,000 for an Inspire 2, £4,000 to £5,000 for an Inspire 1, £2,000 to £2,500 for the Phantom 4, and as I mentioned, back down to £1,100, £1,200 for the last drone bottom right hand corner. Its name escapes me at the moment. But as I mentioned, our choice at the moment, we're enjoying with the Inspire Pro, because we've had that quite a while now, and I know it's now technically been superseded by the Inspire 2, but we're actually putting the Inspire 2 through its paces first. But my default at the moment is still the Inspire Pro. I like the flexibility it gives me. The quality is amazing. Yes, it takes a little longer to set up. Yes, you have to put it away in a rather large box, and you can't exactly go wandering over the hills with it. But the final results that you get, whether that's stills or film, is, in our opinion, is far better. And that's just for our particular clients. So again, it comes back to the ladies and gents that are listening in, is to looking as to what you propose to use the drone for. So in the wedding world, for example, there's no reason whatsoever why you couldn't be using either a Mavic, bottom right hand corner, and certainly the Phantom 4, bottom left hand corner, no problem whatsoever, because of ease of use, portability. Whether you need, in fact, you don't really need the extra quality of the Inspires. The problem is they just look good. And that's the big thing. They just look cool when you get them out, and everybody has a look, and it's just a great looking beast for people to cast their eyes on. Obviously switched off without the propellers on, and they can have a good look at it. So that gives you, hopefully now, everybody, a little overview as to what's out there in the marketplace. The interesting thing to bear in mind, it is like most of the camera and video world, you're always buying extra kit, accessories, bolt-ons, add-ons. So the list guide price, you know, you're looking at 1.5 times to 2 times by the time you've messed around with spare propellers, batteries, heaters, and all kinds of things that you suddenly realize, depending where you're flying, the batteries themselves can get very cold, and they certainly don't like that. So you're having to buy battery warmers and all kinds of things as you then progress into the drone world. The last thing you want is one of these coming out of the air. And that's when we'll come to qualifications and insurance. So that takes us so far, Jane. Hopefully that covers a little bit about the prosumer market and touching on the pro market.
Absolutely, mate. And actually one of the things that have just been asked, which I thought would be good to ask you now, obviously you've talked about having all of these drones that you have yourself, but obviously when people are starting out, there's a question here about with regards to having a backup. You know, most photographers have a second camera, don't they? So, you know, if you're going into this sort of, you know, eyes wide open, properly professional, would you be would you be recommending that you have two drones, whether it's one expensive one and one maybe one cheaper one, if you can't afford the two, but would you be working with a backup, is I guess the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And again, these are the on costs that everybody has to think about. And it's very similar to, quite rightly, because it is just an airborne camera. You wouldn't go out as a professional just with one camera. So the dilemma you now face is you wouldn't go out as a professional, particularly as we are, you know, if your mortgage depends on it, it tends to concentrate the mind somewhat. So we always go out with 2/3 drones. The Mavic, you can, you know, I mean, literally, it's the size of an old cassette recorder, if anybody can remember those kind of things. So I'm 53 or 4 years old now, so I can go back to those days. So, you know, you look at an A4 package to carry around, you can literally just drop that in the back of your car and just leave it there. And what a backup to have. I mean, that's an amazing backup to have at 1,100, 1,300 pounds. So we certainly do that. But our default is always where we can, because of the pro angle, we use the Inspires. But I must say that the Phantom and the Mavic go in the car anyway. It's just a habit that is very worth getting into, because we have had issues, and you will have problems. You will get interference, frequency interference. You will have battery issues, screen issues. So again, as professionals, we would advocate certainly going out with at least one decent backup. So moving on. So we'll have a look at a couple of images. This one's not really good on the eye, to be fair. We'll touch on safety and flight and what have you a little later on in the presentation. But this is just a picture of myself just about to sort of do a flight. And we always get asked the question, is flying a drone hair-raising? You know, I mean, to be fair, excuse the pun, it is a great buzz. But it is a nervous time. And as ever, it's like most things with photography and film, the more you do, the more competent you get. But certainly the risks are far greater with flying the drone, which is why you've got to fly sensibly and safely. Hence why you've got to get yourself qualified, approved by the Civil Aviation Authority, insured, and get yourself up and running. Otherwise, I mean, I started off like this earlier on, and then ended up like the picture on the left after 6 months. So that gives you an idea of what drone flying can do to you. So we'll move on swiftly because that was frightening. So wedding photography as an example. So if you can present bride and groom that kind of shot, it just differentiates you between one, you know, other photographers out there. The other thing we've realized is it suddenly makes you the person that all the wedding coordinators and wedding managers want to talk to, because they kind of love all this imagery showing off the expanse, hopefully, of their venue. So in the wedding world, we put it alongside. So as we're doing photography with bride and groom, as you can see here, and maybe we're doing a walk around sequence, it's absolutely ideal at that point to bring the drone in and do a short sequence with bride and groom. Now, as we mentioned earlier, if they've also paid for filming, because let's just clarify, we charge 2 separate fees, one for stills and one for footage. So if bride and groom require footage, then of course we'll be doing fly pasts with the drone, editing, setting it to music, and they might get a 2-minute overview, 3-minute overview of their wedding day, for instance. And if they've purchased the drone as an addition for their wedding, then they'll get a series and a selection of images taken throughout the day. I suppose a question is going to be from some people, you know, how many times does the drone fly during the day? It really just depends on how much we want to do with the client and the weather. We use it for group shots, opening sequences of the venue, and bride and groom. Apart from that, it doesn't really get used. What you also notice is if you're working at really nice venues, then they're always looking for different shots and angles and different perspectives to show off their venue. So again, you find that's helpful. In the commercial world, then when you're looking at golf photography, for instance, literally gives you another unique perspective. Construction photography, again, lots of drone pilots out there are doing this more or less full time now, where they will do construction photography. Great area of work for drone pilots. And again, commercial, this is a series of work we did, both stills and film, for a group of marinas all around the south coast of England. So again, just gives you a totally unique perspective. Interestingly, you can also use them for environmental family portraits. So we've noticed as well that there's that little gap and it has that buzz, again, excuse the pun, but it does. People want to book because one, they want to show off their really nice properties, and also it's a different take on a family portrait. And we touched on this earlier, you've also got the facet in the commercial world of crop management. So people now are trying to maximize the use of the crop area. So again, you can use the drone for that particular facet. Interestingly, also makes just a great landscape photograph. And we're using them a lot for events as well. So this happened to be, you know, a very nice gathering with lots of antique cars, and it just adds again another unique dimension to the day. So you can see where you can use the drone for all sorts of purposes. However, we've got to be legal, and the whole drone world is besieged by the law, and to be fair, quite rightly so. So as you can see on the screen now, there's quite a lot of blurb all about permissions to fly and aerial aviation. So in effect, you are actually a pilot, you just don't happen to be sat in the drone at that time. So you are governed by air navigation law. And interestingly, at the bottom paragraph, the Civil Aviation Authority, who in the UK govern the use of drones for professionals, they've now changed the wording to commercial operation. So what you actually seek as a drone pilot, if you wish to get qualified and earn money, is you need a PFCO, a permission for commercial operation. Quite an onerous task, has to be updated every 12 months, but that's your ticket to fly. What you can't do is go off as an amateur and receive any form of remuneration or promise thereof, or consideration, as the CAA call it. So you can't have a gift in kind, you can't be a well-meaning friend at a wedding and give it as a gift, because in effect, you are a commercial pilot and you are governed by air law. And as an aside, you're governed by air law anyway as an amateur, but certainly as a professional, because you're earning, that's when you move into the realms of qualification, insurance, risk assessments, to make sure you're flying safely. So with regards to this, I think we've had a little chat about the law, and a few questions that people will be posing is, what do I do about flying my drone? Where can I fly the drone? How high can I go? Can I just have a jolly nice time with it? Well, in effect, it's a plane and it's in the air and you're in airspace. So you have a legal limit, irrespective of whether you're a pro or an amateur. You have a legal limit of 400 feet high. There's a separation between ourselves and the big aircraft. So you don't want to be going over 400 feet. The law also says line of sight, and that is classed as 500 meters. So as you can see on the left, you've got to keep the drone in sight all the time as the drone pilot. And we also, part of our qualification, we also use observers to help and assist as well. And as part of the CAA, you can see here that every time you fly, You must follow the manufacturer's instructions. So they're really covering their back here that if you're flying, it is your responsibility to keep yourself and everybody around you safe. And obviously the hot topic for people is keeping your distance from people, property, certainly in built-up areas. So the law says 50 metres, 150 feet from any people or property. And certainly if you've got crowds in built-up areas, then you're at 150 metres with no overflying. So you can see now where you're quite limited in what you actually can do. Hence why you'll see the vast majority of drone footage and drone imagery is taken at the angle, because you don't really want to be flying over said properties or people. You can actually obtain from the CAA, in certain circumstances, special dispensation. But in general terms, they're the boundaries you have to work in. And in our experience, you can actually work around these quite easily, particularly with the Inspire and the quality of the lenses. And as the photographers that are listening in, we can crop in on the 20 meg RAW file, no problem whatsoever. So actually, I don't see it as a major issue. And again, as it says on the left, you're responsible for each flight. And it can lead to criminal prosecution. You have to stay away from aircraft, airports, nuclear establishments, Buckingham Palace, dare I say. All of those sensitive establishments you have to keep well away from. And it is a criminal offence if you go anywhere near them. So actually part of the software you've now got when you're flying drones is that you actually get notified what type of airspace you are in when you are flying, and therefore it's almost dropping you a subtle hint that you need to make sure you are legal and safe to do so. So we mentioned, so that covers a little bit about the law. We mentioned earlier on about the game changer. So if you just want to sharpen your pencils and you haven't yet thought of your backup plan for your images, there's my cottage now flooded. So just as a little aside again, guys, I can't say it clear enough. You want to be backing up your images or your footage, because you never know, lightning doesn't strike twice, but a fire and a flood, and we're on the road to pestilence. We've booked pestilence in this year, I think. So please back up, cloud, off-site, hard drives, however, but just be aware. Anyway, returning back to the fun. Let's get down to money. And how do we do it? How do I get qualified? Do I need to be qualified? Do I want to go through the rigmarole of qualification? So, for richer, for poorer, entry to market. Takes 3 to 6 months. Yes, you could blitz things and do it in a month, but you're really going to have to be doing nothing else to do that. And you're looking at anywhere between, if you want to do this right, and we all do because we all want to fly safe, you're looking at anywhere between 10 and 30k plus annual renewals, because every year you have to requalify, you reinsure, and every flight you have to log your flight, risk assessments, etc. But interestingly, what we've noticed and what we've been able to do is that we had a return on our 30 or 40, in fact we're at about 50,000 now, but we've had a return on that within 12 months. So it's an opportunity for people to earn a living, let alone as an addition. But again, you've got to be prepared to do the outlay in time and learning. That's why I touched on it earlier on the pie chart, that we kind of don't do anything for nothing really, because your fees should reflect your expertise, and certainly in this instance your investment in flying safely. But also you are actually therefore selling off the images and the footage and the printed material. So wedding albums and things, very, very important that we get our work seen in print rather than just screen. So we're great advocates of making sure that we offer people printed medium in whether it's commercial, an event or a wedding. We're certainly offering people in print. Now we've got control of the print quality, and we can therefore show our profession correctly. So you can go through all this rigmarole, or you might want to subcontract it to a qualified pilot. So we've got 3 or 4 shoots this year now for other wedding and event photographers who don't want to go through the rigmarole of qualification, so they just subcontract us in. So I'm more than happy to do that. Because if you actually think about what you have to do as a professional, to become a professional, you've got to enroll on a course and do a pilot theory course, which isn't easy actually. You've got the theory exam. You've also got to produce an operations manual. And this is almost classed as the Holy Grail. Our ops manual for flying is 70 pages long, and it contains everything from no alcohol use to battery management, flight logs, navigation, air safety, emergency procedures. So there's quite a lot to it. Then you've got to go and do an operation exam where you're examined to check literally how you fly and if you're safe to fly and safety procedures. Once you've actually done all of that and you obtain the PFCO, your permissions for commercial operation, you've then got to get insurance. And that can be anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 or 5,000, depending on how much liability you want. So as you can see, it's quite onerous to do drone flying, but we decided to literally take the plunge because we saw and we thought there was a gap in the market. And so far, it seems to be working. And again, the pun is that things are taking off. So you have an option of doing all this yourself, or you can subcontract to a qualified pilot, such as ourselves. Or we're actually members of a great organisation called Drone Safe. And on there are registered, qualified, insured pilots. And as I was chatting briefly with Jay, it's a little like the wedding and certainly photography and film world, is if you lose out on a quote or a gig, no problem. I don't mind losing out as long as I'm losing out to a fellow pro. And if that fellow pro quite rightly is qualified and insured, then I've got no problem with that whatsoever. What we don't want to do, of course, is have amateurs therefore taking on certainly, aerial drone photography and filming. So if we're going to lose out, let's lose out to another qualified pilot. No problem whatsoever. So just getting somewhere towards the end now, because I'll probably have a few minutes questions. So moving on, we do actually offer drone training modules. Interestingly, people seem to want to do a try before you buy. So we've lumped that together with the fundamentals of flying safely, whether you're an amateur or an aspiring professional. For those people that are wanting to qualify, then we do a pre-flight assessment. So we can get you ready to go for your PFCO. What we can also do is help on the Holy Grail, the operations manual, because it can be a little nightmare doing all the research that you have to do to ensure that you've ticked all the boxes in an ops manual. So there's food for thought. Any of the folks listening in this evening, you've got an option here to receive a 10% discount if you quote Top Tog on any of the modules taken before the end of 2017. So we sort of have flown through that. It's, again, great pun. So in summary, under the sort of wedding analogy for richer for poorer, we've got to be safe and proud of our industry. Please, guys out there, whether you're doing photography, filming in general, certainly drone, sell your images and your footage, please, and keep things in print. For better, for worse, look at reviewing your business, understand your market and see if this is for you. If it is, do you do it yourself or do you outsource it? And at the end of the day, as you've seen, if you look after your fellow professionals and your premises, and unfortunately with us, your home, then you might still survive in the industry after 14, 15 years. And the last one there, of course, is diversify or die. We are literally looking at this more on a monthly basis in our business, other ways of monetizing and earning our fantastic living. We love what we do, but we also need to pay our mortgage, hence why we don't want to be doing freebies. So I hope you've gained a little understanding. There's some contact details there if people want to drop me a line. Do apologise if we've rushed through a section that was really important for you, but I'm more than happy to follow up. Hand back to Jay if there's any questions, concerns. If there's any questions, I'll take them. If there's any concerns, you're there for Jay.
Cheers, mate. No, we've got some questions, but as expected, I think you covered quite a lot of them. So, but there's a few that I definitely want to touch on before we go. But before I do any of that, Dave, I mean, we've had a thorough session from you again tonight with loads of insight. And and let's face it, it's not the cheapest thing in the world to do, but the key thing, like anything, is do it properly, isn't it? I think that's
absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So guys, obviously I've shared the links with Dave. If you want to get in touch with him, we'll also post you out an email tomorrow for how to contact Dave. Obviously, if you're interested in any of this, then please get in touch with him. Like I said, he's got his courses. We're happy to answer any of your questions. Dave, my questions aren't in any particular order. I'll just go through the list that I have in front of me here. I thought this was quite a nice question. When you started doing the drone photography, how did you go about marketing that? Was it towards your existing customers, or did you just go straight fresh and market it as a brand new business? What's the best advice you can give there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Everybody's different as ever in life, and that's what makes it a great place. But we obviously literally bolted it on initially onto our wedding market, because that was a logical gap for us. So because we've done wedding photography on and off for 30 years, we're fairly comfortable in that genre, but never complacent, of course, but fairly comfortable. So we thought, well, we could add that literally as a buzz on the wedding day. So our entry into the market initially was for weddings, but because we are business people, we always had our eye on the larger picture of the commercial market is really where the money is. But our way of learning and gaining and trying to get a quicker payback initially was in the wedding sector. So I would say to people that if you are a photographer filming, whichever genre you happen to be, whether it's event photography, then try to bolt it onto that initially is my advice, and then away you go. If you're fortunate where one or two people, if you're living together and your partner's got another income and you want to just set up as a drone pilot, then wonderful, great, have a go. You will literally have a blast. I mean, it is so much fun. It is fantastic. And literally what it's given for us is another zest to our work. Right throughout the few years that we've been doing this, we absolutely love literally flying by the seat of your pants, but I mean that in a professional manner.
Excellent. We have Kevin online with us, and he currently has an Inspire 2, and he asks the question, do you ever fly as a single pilot and do the filming as well? I'm currently doing a CAA approved course.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, and this is where we touched on it earlier with some of the earlier slides, where the Inspire range, you have the option of having two modules. We do a bit of each, to be honest. I'm a little bit of a control freak. It's probably my nuclear background. You don't get a second chance. So I tend to be a little bit of a control freak. And depending on what you're doing, if the filming and or photography is not too onerous, then to be fair, you can actually control the Inspire and the camera yourself. Because quite a bit of the time, you can actually keep the camera in the direction of flight. And that serves a great purpose, because that cuts down on the need for the second person to have control of the camera. But if you want to be a little more creative, and quite rightly you want to be angling the camera, literally turning the camera, then that's when the second creative comes in. But obviously the main qualified pilot needs to keep control of the drone, and the way that the software works is the second person takes control of the camera. So it certainly has its usage. Quite a bit of the stuff we did for marinas, we were dual use, but predominantly things for weddings and things that are a little quicker, then it's just altogether easier and slicker and quicker to do the flying and the filming, because you can see exactly what you're filming all the time. And as a drone pilot, you've literally one eye in the sky and one eye on your screen anyway, because you're taking in a lot of information as well as doing the filming and or stills.
Brilliant. And you mentioned actually there about Marina. That's one of the questions that I've hung on to. Do you need to get special permission to film around a marina?
No, what you've got to do is you've just got to you're governed again by you know, the legal distances of 150 meters. So what you'll actually see, you can see sometimes footage with people where they've been going incredibly close to things. Well, again, you know, that is illegal, so you shouldn't be doing that. But what we've managed to do is be able to, you can do fly around marinas, and with the quality, as I mentioned earlier, that you have, particularly in the stills, you can actually crop in, and there's no hardly any degradation at all. So a lot of it comes down to planning your shoot, and I will be really honest as well, it's also setting the expectations of your client, because they expect you to fly in their front door. And you've got to be very careful, of course. I mean, don't get me wrong, drones can fly indoors, but people just seem to think it's incredibly easy to do. And I think the slight problem you have sometimes as professionals, photographers and filmmakers, if you make it look too easy, then if you're not careful, it can affect your price. So we always make sure it's there's a little bit of mystique to what we do.
Brilliant. Actually, we've got a couple of questions in a similar vein that I hung on to here, Dave. Do you need different permissions if you take the drone abroad? And the second question was, are there differences for Europe? So abroad in general and in Europe, or is that a different thing altogether?
Yeah, there's different regulations. So the FAA in America, federal laws are slightly different. You'll find that each country has its own take. Some countries have banned or are in the process of trying to, you know, ban the use of drones. Certain areas have banned the use of drones. So my advice is that if you're working with a client, and let's say the client happens to be UK based, then as long as you have your permissions to fly, then away you go. What you've then got to look at is what are the local rules and regulations when you then start flying in other countries, and that's when it comes down to a lot of research. And this again is what people don't realize. So as an example, just literally for each flight we do, there's an hour, 30 minutes, an hour, or an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours preparation, depending on the complexities of what we're doing. But if you then get into a detailed risk assessment, you could be then into 2 to 3 to a week's work, and you actually haven't even taken off. So again, as ever in life, there's a lot more to this than most people think. That's why you've got to consider, if it's for you, great, get on board, you'll have a blast. If you want to outsource it, but outsource it to a pro. Brilliant,
mate. Brilliant. I think this might actually be the last question, but I've got a few things to share with you before we finish. I thought this was interesting and actually kept onto it, and then you've answered it as well, but I'll ask it again because it reiterates talking about, you know, training and qualifications. So the question that actually came in, and it came in quite early, which was quite interesting, is I'm interested in getting into drone photography. Should I go out, buy myself a cheap drone, i.e. £50, just to see if I'm capable of flying one before I spend the big bucks, or would you recommend, which I know you mentioned earlier that you do, and obviously there must be other courses, the try before you buy, so go on a paid for weekend, use the kit that you might aspire to using in the industry. What's your thoughts on buying a cheap one to learn how to fly with? Actually, that's a good question on its own.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, irrespective of, obviously we're business people, we'd like people to come to us or go to another qualified pilot to learn, but you know, if you want to go out and you're on a recreation ground and 150 meters away from people and buildings, and you want to fly on a recreational basis, then no problem whatsoever. And when it's like riding a bike, we're all going to have a go. But the advantage I think we have, and other pilots have if they're offering the service, is that you can literally, as you mentioned it, try before you buy. There is so many different drones and uses of them out there, it actually gets quite mind-blowing. The temptation is you should just go and buy one and then take it out. and then, you know, I've seen many a person on a, you know, in their back garden, just, you know, lifting up a drone and what have you, and it is absolutely frightening. So really what we've got to do is make sure that we're doing it in a controlled environment, because it is really good fun, but it just has to be safe fun.
Brilliant. But like I said, let's reiterate, you know, you run the courses, so if you're interested in them at all, get in touch with Dave.
Yeah.
He's giving you a discount.
No problem whatsoever. If people wish to go down that route or another drone pilot, no problem whatsoever. We'd rather have it that way than you set off on the right footing.
Brilliant, brilliant. Dave, last question. Oh no, I've got a couple sneaking through. Okay, guys, so these are going to be the last couple, otherwise we will get stuck on it.
Not what's the northern accent, please. It's not what.
No, it's not the northern accent, mate. You're all good. This is a specific question about DJI and profiles, so a very techie question for you, bud. Yeah. What profile do you favour for your weddings with the DJI picture? That means nothing to me, but it sounds like something we've talked about tonight.
Well, it's a little bit like, you know, in the pure photography world, whether you want to shoot a JPEG, and in most DSLRs, you can have a preset, let's say, of landscape and vibrant or, you know, mute. But in all honesty, what we do, everything we do, we shoot raw, because predominantly, as I mentioned on the slides, our bread and butter is photography. Then I'm shooting everything in raw. And then, which is, as if the photographers and people listening in, you're ending up with a very flat base line to start from with your image, and then you can then stylize that post-shoot. So we prefer to shoot raw. Interestingly, what most of the drones out there, they will actually shoot raw and JPEG like a DSLR anyway. So if you want a quick edit, you can just use the JPEG. You can set to take a RAW and a JPEG. So if you want a quick output and your client wants a very quick output, no problem whatsoever. You've got to process JPEG as you would from any DSLR. You are literally having a camera in the air. There's very little differences. It's just how you're controlling it, and you don't want it falling out of the air. That's the slight dilemma.
Brilliant. Brilliant. This is just slipped through there. I don't know, Dave, whether we want to cover it or not, but what's the sort of average day rate for a drone pilot? What would you be recommending?
Well, it depends on what you're doing, but you're looking in the £1,000 to £2,000 to £3,000 mark, depending on if you're in commercial flying and or wedding market. You know, you can't, I don't believe you can't be going out there for £100 and flying £10,000 worth of kit with all the insurance, £3,000 to £5,000 worth of insurance, or certainly £1,000 worth of insurance, and offering your service at £100. If you do, you're on the lowest common denominator for the rest of your life. So this is why we talk about valuing your work. I'd rather turn a piece of work down than be knocked down on price. I know it's difficult, and I know it's a difficult market for everybody, but I'd rather just turn the piece of work down, because the sheer amount of work you have to do is just not worth it for said hundreds or few £100s.
Perfect answer, Dave. It's exactly what we preach within our, you know, photography business mentoring program, the experience, value your work. You've nailed it, mate. So, like you said, it's not a cheap process to get involved with. So make sure you're earning your money back and obviously valuing it. So brilliant, perfect. I'm glad you answered that. It was spot on, mate. Absolutely brilliant. Dave, I want to thank you for sharing tonight. Loads of thanks have come through on the chat panel. Very informative, lots of eye-openers, people saying that they are going to be in touch with you, so let's hope that does happen for you. But like I said, all the information we'll share again tomorrow with them on the follow-up emails, and they're available on the site. What I will finish with, Dave, and I think I asked this of you when we chatted for the first time last week, have you thought about moving, mate?
No, we're determined to beat pestilence as well.
It was brilliant. I remember that. Obviously, I think that was a question that I asked you after you showed me those 2 slides last week. But as soon as you showed the second slide, it kind of lit up. Yeah, please suggest that Dave might want to move. As
all the photographers and filmmakers listening will know, we are, as a trade, we are a resilient bunch. So we will keep going. We will not be beat.
However, you know, even though it was flooded, your cottage does look beautiful, and I'm very envious. But yeah, I'm going to stick to being up the hills up in the valley, so at least the water flow goes
and on
down.
that bombshell, yeah.
Dave, thank you so much for tonight, mate. It's been
thanks very much to everybody if you're still listening in, and check out some more stuff on the Photographers Academy. It's just a great learning platform, guys. And good evening. Jay, you can run now.